Nearly 5 years after the disappearance of Jennifer Dulos, the first trial in connection with her murder.
State has brought charges against Michelle Troconis.
7 weeks of gripping testimony.
And he was trying to get in. And her face was just, she was terrified.
And graphic evidence.
It's almost right down the center.
All coming down to this moment.
The jury has reached a unanimous verdict for all 6 counts.
Guilty. 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 Guilty.
Michelle Troconis hanging her head in anguish before being led away in handcuffs. Her family inconsolable.
She's innocent, and I know that. My heart knows that.
And while Jennifer's family and friends thank the investigators who worked so hard on her case, they say it's no victory when 5 children are growing up without their mother. Right now, a closer look at the verdict and what happens next. We're taking you inside the trial of Michelle Troconis. And thanks for joining us for Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. I'm Shannon Miller. Right now, Michelle Troconis is at your correctional institution in Niantic after a jury found her guilty on all 6 counts she faced in the connection to the death of Jennifer Dulos. These photos taken shortly after the verdict was read, the defendant distraught, hearing the jury's decision. Here is the moment we learned she would be convicted on the most serious of the charges she faced.
Is she guilty or not guilty of the first count of the information charging the defendant with conspiracy to commit murder in violation of Connecticut General Statutes, Section 53A, 48A, and 53A-54A, subsection A?
Guilty.
Now, one by one, the counts were read by the clerk, and each time the jury foreperson read guilty. And after each guilty count, Troconis appeared more and more overcome with emotion, crying throughout, even appearing to look back at her family at one point. Here are the charges she was convicted on: conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of evidence tampering, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit evidence tampering, and hindering prosecution. I want to bring in my colleague, Kevin Geis, joining us in studio today. You were at Stamford Superior Court every single day, Kevin, throughout this trial. Take us back to that moment on Friday. You were inside the courtroom, of course, when the verdict was read. What happened in that room that we may not have seen from the pool camera?
Right, so you heard sort of when that verdict came in on that most serious charge, almost immediately everyone inside the room sort of shifted their weight. You could hear people shuffling around, and it almost felt as though the air was sucked out of the room in that moment, and emotion sort of immediately filled that void. Now, everybody sort of, from the friends and family of Jennifer Dulos to the friends and family of Michelle Troconis, immediately overcome with emotion, sort of trying to grapple with, immediately what comes next, what happens now. It was sort of just a massive emotional moment for just about every single person sitting in that room.
I want to go now, Kevin, to the reaction of the family on both sides of this. The family and friends of Jennifer Dulos left the courthouse together, most of them wearing the color purple, a color signifying domestic violence awareness. While none of them spoke outside the courthouse, Carrie Luft, a longtime friend of Jennifer's, who also serves as her family's spokesperson, released a statement. It reads in part, "The verdict is a crucial attribution of accountability, not a victory. There can be no victory when 5 children are growing up without their mother." It goes on to say Jennifer Dulos still has not been found. We have a lost mother, daughter, sister, cousin, and cherished friend. Jennifer's loved ones cannot bury her next to her father. 6 of Jennifer's friends also spoke with Dateline about how the mother of 5 from New Canaan impacted their lives.
Here we are today to share the beautiful human that she is. The smile. We saw it on Gloria. The smile.
She just had the most beautiful laugh. She was funny. She was funny.
She was a person that showed up. She would have done that for us. For me, it was important to show up for her and her kids.
Without being prying, but I think everybody would like to know how the children are doing in general.
They're very impressive young people, and they are going to do amazing things.
Are you here for the children as much as anything else?
I was absolutely.
Kevin, I want to go back to that statement from Carrie Luft. There is no victory here because 5 children are without their mother.
Right, and we heard that sentiment echoed as well from the state's attorney's office down in the Stamford-Norwalk district. They said, in part, while they hope that today's verdict brings Jennifer's family and friends some peace, we also hope that someday we can provide resolution to the still unanswered question of where Jennifer rests. I assure you, the state of Connecticut and this office will never stop looking. So, of course, saying that they will continue to search for exactly where Jennifer Dulos rests at this point.
Well, that fight continues for them, and Luft also said the family hopes that this will spark potentially new leads in the case, and they seem to remain hopeful that Jennifer's body will one day be found, which is something, of course, that everyone has said that those family, the children here deserve to have an answer on that front.
All right, and state prosecutors as well as state investigators have also sort of echoed similar sentiments over the years that they're going to continue to look, regardless of the outcome of these trials, regardless of sort of how much time it may take, they'll continue to search for Jennifer Farber-Dulos.
We want to get now to the reaction from the Troconis family. They were visibly distraught as they left the courthouse and stopped to speak with the media. Family members adamant it was the wrong decision and that what happened was not justice.
Because has been a tremendous injustice in the trial of my daughter. She's innocent, and we will keep proving that forever.
We do care to know the truth of what happened to Jennifer, but we don't know what happened to Jennifer. And choosing and putting my sister as the guilty person is not the right thing to do because she's innocent.
Have some compassion. I mean, your heart, look inside your heart. We cannot live in a world with this much hate. My sister's innocent. This is wrong. This wasn't a fair trial from day one. Wasn't a fair trial, and you all know that.
Now, later on Friday, I spoke with Michelle's father and sister in an exclusive interview after the verdict. Carlos Troconis and Claudia Marmol told me they are devastated, but they will never stop fighting for Michelle.
She's hanging on, and she's strong, and she will overcome all this injustice.
I actually shouted to her, "I love you." I know that I wasn't supposed to, but I want her to know that we love her and we're not going to stop fighting because this has been an injustice.
What do you want people today to know about your daughter and to know about your sister?
They convicted the wrong person, and not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 charges. And that this time she's already served a lot of punishment for these 4.5, almost 5 years. That's been enough. She doesn't know anything. She would have said it if she knew it. She's a mother herself. She's a daughter. She's a sister.
Now, the family told me how this whole process has impacted Michelle's health. Her father says she has symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, including heart arrhythmia. Her sister says she's also had a hard time trusting men, including at one point her own father. The family also spoke about the unanswered questions they have for investigators and the hours of questioning that Michelle underwent. We got some insight into what happened after her second interview with police. Carlos told me he knew Michelle didn't know anything because that's the day Michelle told her father she started to believe that Fotis Dulos may have been responsible for Jennifer's murder.
She came crying to me, and I hugged her, and she told me, "Daddy, I think that Fotis did it." And I asked her, "Why? Why do you say that?" Because all the evidence they showed me, the blood in the Tacoma, all these things, they scare me. They raped my photograph with my daughter, and you never will see your daughter again. And that's when I realized that she didn't know anything.
Now, Kevin, the family also addressed the intense media coverage that Michelle's case has garnered since day one. You were with me on verdict day. Of course, that swarm of photographers and reporters descended once again at Stamford Superior Court, as they have done throughout this entire time. The Troconis family says this is the Michelle they know, vibrant, active, and loving. But the court of public opinion had another narrative for her, which they say is not true, and they want to set the record straight.
The fact that she was this paramour, that she was this lover, this was a home wrecker, that's inaccurate. My sister would never, ever, ever get into someone else's life. She's a mother herself, and she's an only a mother to an only child. So that is, her dedication, her passion in her life. She's an amazing mother, so she would never harm any other mother. That's number one. The fact that they claim that she was the cause of this, that's inaccurate. She's not the other woman. Fotis had moved on.
Now, this was an extensive interview. More from the Troconis family can be found on the NBC Connecticut app and NBCConnecticut.com. And Kevin, you spoke with Michelle's attorney, John Schoenhorn, about the next steps, including a possible appeal.
Right, and he did note that there are a few sort of legal steps that have to happen before an appeal is on the table. Schoenhorn first has to file post-trial motions for a new trial in which he lists reason why the trial may not have been fair.
I believe that many of those issues have merit, and only if those are denied and Michelle is sentenced, you then file an appeal. And the question is, what do you argue on appeal? In my view, it's not just whether there are any issues, it's which ones not to argue because of how many errors I think there were in this process.
He's also filing a post-trial motion for acquittal because, in his view, there was insufficient evidence for conviction on any of the charges, but especially for conspiracy to commit murder. Only after exhausting those post-trial motions and after Troconis is sentenced can an appeal happen.
So, Kevin, what about the chances of Michelle making bond? A judge had set that bond at $6 million on Friday. Schoenhorn said that the family was trying to get their assets together, but that might be too high of a sum.
Right. So I did hear from Schoenhorn last night. He did confirm she is still at York Correctional Facility. Over the weekend, he said it does not appear a bond package is a likely prospect, at least in the short term.
All right, now Michelle Troconis is due back in court later on this month, but it's not for her sentencing just yet. She is scheduled for that contempt hearing on March 21st. Now, this all stems from what allegedly happened in court on February 15th and the potential image on Troconis' laptop screen in court, which we have blurred. A friend of Jennifer Farber-Dulos alerted prosecutors that she said she saw a page of the sealed custody report that was on Michelle's laptop that nobody is supposed to have access to. Michelle again now faces a contempt charge. Judge Randolph has recused himself in this contempt hearing, so it will be a different judge, and Michelle Troconis will have different attorney and representation for that March 21st hearing. Now, Troconis' sentencing day is on those 6 charges she was convicted of is now set for May 31st. All right, switching gears now, Kevin. Ever since Jennifer Dulos disappeared, domestic violence groups here in our state have advocated for more protection for domestic violence victims, especially when it comes to family court. Now, they argue some of Jennifer's calls for protection throughout this court went unanswered because there was not any allegations of physical violence between her and Fotis Dulos in her filings.
Right. So advocates are hoping Jennifer's case can continue to spur action. Domestic violence group Connecticut Protective Moms have been advocating in memory of Jennifer Dulos for years in an attempt to reform the family court system.
We have to keep remembering what happened to Jennifer. That's my goal. Because, yeah, there's accountability, there's no justice.
The Dulos divorce was one of the most litigious family court cases in Connecticut, with hundreds of filings. Both the state and defense in Troconis' trial, there was also that sealed custody evaluation that came down just before Jennifer Dulos was murdered that both the prosecution and defense brought up in their arguments.
And those advocates also say that Jennifer's case really helped kind of move the needle when it comes to domestic violence reform. They argue that there's still a lot of work to be done. It's worth to point out there's actually a Connecticut law related to domestic violence, which, as you recall, was named in part after Jennifer Dulos and another Jennifer Magnano. Jennifer's law expands the definition of domestic violence to include a pattern of abuse known as coercive control. And advocates say more needs to be done to help recognize domestic abuse that does not include physical harm. All right, much more to come on Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. Coming up next, we will chat with attorney Jim Bergen about his reaction to that verdict. Michelle Troconis found guilty on all counts. We'll be right back.
I'm surprised. I'm definitely surprised. I did not think they had the evidence for conspiracy to commit murder.
That reaction on Friday from attorney Lindy Orso, the attorney for Fotis Doulos' longtime employee Pavel Gumieni, who was granted immunity for his cooperation in the case. Orso says he was surprised that the jury came back with that verdict. Welcome back to Inside the Trial. I'm Michelle Troconis. We are joined for a final time by one of our analysts throughout the trial, attorney Jim Bergen, partner at Shipman and Goodwin, who handles personal injury and criminal cases and also helps teach trial lawyers in big cases like this. Jim, you were on with Kevin Nathan during our live verdict coverage on Friday. But for our audience who has been watching your analysis for the last several weeks, can you talk about your reaction to the verdict? One of those things that Lindsay Orso said was that, again, this may have all worked against Michelle, of course, some of the evidence that was brought against her.
Well, I thought it was not a surprise only because I had just finished paying very careful attention to the summations, and the summations did it. It was one of those things that you don't want that to happen if you're a defense lawyer. You want to take advantage of those summations. But in this case, the prosecution really did weave things together. And what happened was, I believe the defense unintentionally played into the prosecution by not focusing on the only thing that mattered. The only thing that mattered was her frame of mind. And by spending credibility and time doing things that nobody wants to do, nobody wants to hear that, I thought there was room throughout the whole trial to flip it the other way, so that instead of him helping the prosecution, I would say 80% of the prosecution's case helped the defense by showing how diabolical Fotis was, and easily for the defense to say Jennifer's family deserves all the love, all the praise, and the police deserve all the gratitude for working really hard. Yeah, they did a few things over the top, but basically what they did is they protected all of us. And that feeling of all of us, that's what you need when you're working with a jury. The jury doesn't want to hear you preach at them. They want to decide for themselves because that's their job. So what happened was, when Sean McGinnis said, you know, Act 3, your verdict, I'm like, oh boy, he caught exactly what trials are about. They are what we're all doing. We're serving them.
Their decision. One of the things that attorney Lindy Orso said that may have worked against Michelle is that in Connecticut, defendants who are charged with murder get a 12-person jury, but for conspiracy to commit murder, it's only a 6-person jury. He says it's a lot easier, again, to convince 6 people than 12. So what did you think? Do you think that that played a role in all this?
Well, to be honest with you, there are academic papers on that subject, and I never concern myself with them because it really doesn't affect what I have to do as a trial lawyer. Whether I got 6 or I got 1, I got a judge, or I got 12, or I've got a town committee. Persuasion is about moving people from point A to point B and letting the evidence do it, not you do it. That's it. And so whether it was 12 or 6, the problems in this case were not the number of jurors. The problem was the jurors completely identified with the themes of the prosecution. Poor Jennifer, and wonderful police. Oh, and Michelle, oh yeah, you were with that bad guy. As opposed to, it's all about her head, and that guy, the whole 30 points of the prosecution's summation, that was making defense points. That's how diabolical Fotis was. He knew he had her completely convinced. He spent 2 years convincing her that he's a great family man, and, well, she bought it. And he knew that part of his plan was, oh, she'll never question me. I can manipulate her and use her to be doing all these things. And then when she finally realized it, and we're watching her realize during those 8 hours of interviews, she's collapsing because the police are actually teaching her what she was missing because she believed him.
And hearing from her father that that's when it fully started to come together, according to him.
Yeah, I was very
Fotis
impressed.
Could have been responsible for that.
I can't believe that interview you got, because that was the whole point. And it was hard, but that's what this trial was about.
Attorney John Schoenhorn vowing to appeal that decision. Talk about that process, and do you think there's any sort of a chance that this one could be overturned on appeal?
Yes, there is a chance. And for me, the issue is, how do you get the appellate court and the Supreme Court to appreciate what fundamentally happened here was the presumption of innocence got sort of set aside. But it wasn't because of the judge. The judge really did what he could about the presumption of innocence. But when you say, is there a chance? I want to say it's better than the Jim Carrey chance. Everybody who watched Dumb and Dumber, you're telling me I got a chance, 1 in a million. I don't know what those chances are, but I do believe that, tried a different way, the jury would have focused on Michelle and she wouldn't be in this situation.
Her sentencing is coming up on May 31st. Again, she was convicted on all 6 counts, totaling a maximum sentence of a potential 50 years. Do you think the judge would hand down the maximum sentence, Jem, and would it run consecutively, or could they be served concurrently? I thought it was interesting at the end that he upped that bond amount.
Well, to answer the first question, almost all serious crimes, you can throw in tampering and hindering because that's what you do. You know, if you commit a serious crime, you do everything you can to protect yourself. So almost always when you have sentencing and there are those subordinate ones, they merge and they make it concurrent. I can't say that's what's going to happen here, but I believe this judge would recognize the most serious count that he's got is enough, and he probably doesn't even have to do the full 20 years in order to address what happened here. Because even at sentencing, you're allowed to think about how bad Fotis was and how much she just fell for him.
Jim, your insight throughout all of this has been absolutely so helpful to walk us through all of this. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your perspective.
Glad to help.
Thank you very much. And coming up, we are going to take a look back at the key moments from the trial, starting back from day one. Stay with us. And welcome back to Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. It was a long 7-week trial, grueling for the attorneys, the families, and the jury. Let's take you back through some of the major moments on the trial, starting with day one. The trial began back on January 11th with testimony and video from police first at the scene in New Canaan when Jennifer Dulos was reported missing. And the emotion of the case came early on with moving testimony from nanny Lauren Almeida, who considered Jennifer a friend and confidant.
And he was trying to get in, and her face was just, she was terrified.
There were 3 jurors dismissed over the course of this trial. One of them was dismissed on day 6 after comparing the case to the movie Gone Girl. And on day 8, a silent courtroom as a shirt and bra covered in Jennifer's blood and cut down the middle were displayed by prosecutors. The jury saw the first of Michelle Troconis' 3 interviews with police on January 25th.
Can you tell me with 100% certainty that you saw Fotis in the house on the morning of the 24th?
Then a key witness for the prosecution. Pavel Gumieni, who had been granted immunity for his testimony, spent 2 days on the stand.
She said that bed should be buried right next to this door.
On day 22, an unexpected turn of events. Michelle Troconis accused by the prosecution of having a sealed custody report on her laptop. She now faces a contempt charge. Then on day 23, prosecutors introduced a new piece of evidence, video of smoke rising from the 4 Jefferson Crossing chimney 3 separate times. The prosecution capping off their case with Jennifer's mother, Gloria Farber. Her testimony short but powerful.
Have you seen your daughter Jennifer since she failed to meet you at your apartment in New York City on May 24th, 2019?
No.
The defense then taking over, presenting expert witnesses to explain inconsistencies in the interviews Michelle gave police. Their final witness, Clara Duberon, a close friend of Troconis.
She was worried because Jennifer disappeared.
And finally, the high-stakes closing arguments. The prosecution tried to weave together all the evidence they presented into a narrative, while the defense tried to poke holes in their case.
But Fotis Dulos needed help to commit that murder. He needed an alibi. He needed the defendant.
Michelle simply did not know.
Then, after about 2 days of deliberations, the verdict.
Guilty.
Michelle Troconis found guilty on all counts. She's scheduled to be sentenced on May 31st, 5 years and 1 week after Jennifer's disappearance. And we are back now with my colleague Kevin Geis. Boy, Kevin, I think about 5 years ago when Jennifer Dulos was first reported missing, we heard about this New Canaan mom of 5, this intense search for her down in Fairfield County. It then transcended and went to the Hartford area. And then you just think about so many moving parts since then. You were in the trial every single day throughout all of this. What are your biggest takeaways?
Watching state prosecutors take 5 years, essentially, of evidence that police had pulled together and sort of create this entire one start-to-finish story. Watching all of those details come together inside that courtroom was absolutely fascinating. All the evidence they had collected, miles apart between New Canaan as well as Farmington and Avon, all these different scenes, pulling it all together was absolutely fascinating to watch.
And yet, the search for Jennifer Dulos continues. The search for answers continues as another trial. We still anticipate another co-defendant in this case. We will continue to stay on top of all of the moving parts of the Jennifer Dulos case. That wraps up our exclusive Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis streaming coverage. If you want to rewatch any episodes, you can find them on NBCConnecticut.com, our app, and on the NBC Connecticut YouTube channel. We appreciate you joining with us throughout the last 7 weeks.